Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something completely different today?
Absolutely. I think the listeners are going to love this one.
I hope so. We're exploring the world of prairie and wildflower gardens.
Oh, cool.
I know, right? Imagine a garden that's just bursting with life and color.
Yeah, it's not just about looks, right?
Exactly. It's a haven for wildlife, too.
I love that.
We've got a great guide for this deep dive, an article called Prairie Wildflower Garden Design, crafting a lush, biodiversity-rich meadow in your backyard.
Okay, a meadow in my backyard. That sounds kind of wild, right?
Right. You might be thinking, isn't that a bit, well, unkempt?
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's actually a common misconception.
Okay, so tell me more. What's the reality?
It's not about letting your yard turn into a jungle. It's more like finding this balance. You harness that natural, spontaneous growth, but create a space that feels intentional and beautiful.
So you're saying there's a method to the madness.
Exactly.
I've always loved the look of those traditional English gardens, with perfectly trimmed hedges and all.
Oh, yeah, they're stunning.
But there's so much work, so much upkeep. If someone wants a beautiful garden but doesn't have a ton of time, would a prairie garden be a good fit?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
One of the great things about prairie gardens is that they're pretty low maintenance.
Now, that's what I like to hear. I know we'll get into the details of design later, but what kinds of plants are we talking about here? The article mentions some interesting ones like big blue stem grass and black-eyed Susans.
Yeah, those are some classics. Big blue stem grass is like the backbone of the garden. It has these tall, graceful stems, and then you've got your black-eyed Susans, those bright pops of yellow that just scream prairie meadow.
So it's not just about one star plant, but a whole community of different species.
Yeah, exactly. And they all work together.
Now, the article really emphasizes using native plants.
Absolutely. And for good reason.
But how do we even know which plants are native to our area? I mean, it's not like everyone's a botanist.
It might sound intimidating, but it's not as hard as you think. A good place to start is your local nursery.
Okay, that makes sense.
They can point you in the right direction. Plus, there are tons of great online resources, too, like the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. They have this awesome database where you can search by your zip code and find out which plants are native to your region.
Super helpful. Okay, so we've got our beautiful low-maintenance plants. But now what? How do we arrange them? I mean, the article talks about meandering paths and avoiding strict geometry. Is that really that important?
It really is. It's all about creating this sense of exploration and discovery.
Yeah.
Think about those trails you hike on.
Oh, yeah.
They wind through the landscape, and you never know what you're going to find around the next bend.
You're right. Okay, that makes sense. But how do you make a prairie garden look intentional?
It's a bit of a balancing act, but you can definitely achieve structure without making it too formal.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you do that?
Think about incorporating different elements. You could have gravel beds for drainage, berms to create little microclimates, or even a small water feature for movement and sound.
I'm picturing it now, the winding paths, tall grasses swaying in the breeze, bursts of color from wildflowers. But is the color palette kind of limited? Just greens and browns?
Not at all. You'll get plenty of vibrant color.
Okay, good. I was worried there for a second.
But the cool thing about a prairie garden is that the colors change with the seasons. It's like a living tapestry.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
So in the spring, you might have softer pastels from wildflowers, like columbine and bleeding heart.
I love those.
Me too. Then as summer rolls around, you get those vibrant oranges, reds, and yellows from things like coneflowers and black-eyed Susans.
So it's like a whole new garden every few months.
Pretty much. And then when fall comes, the colors shift to deeper, earthier tones. It's amazing.
That's so cool. It really is like having a garden that transforms throughout the year.
Exactly. And it's not just the colors that change. It's the whole mood and feel of the garden, too. It's like a different experience each season.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, I'm already picturing those buzzing bees and rustling grasses.
Oh, you're going to have all that.
Yeah.
And speaking of buzzing bees, let's talk about the ecological benefits of prairie gardens.
Yeah, right. We mentioned pollinators earlier, but how else do these gardens make a difference for the environment?
Well, they're amazing for biodiversity. Like, you plant these native species, and you're creating a home and a food source for all these different creatures, insects, birds, everything.
Wow, so it's like you're building a little ecosystem in your backyard.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about making a pretty space for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about giving back to nature and supporting the balance of things.
Right, totally. So it's not just about what we take, but what we give back.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And here's the thing. The more diverse your garden is, the stronger it becomes. Like, you're creating this web of life that can handle pests, diseases, even climate change better.
So it's almost like the wilder it is, the healthier it is.
Kinda, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. I bet there's also this really personal connection people form with these gardens.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly grounding, being surrounded by all those sights and sounds and smells of nature.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a different world, one that runs on its own time.
Exactly. It's a chance to slow down, observe, really just tune into those natural rhythms.
And that connection probably just deepens as you see it change throughout the year.
Oh, for sure. You start to understand that cyclical nature, growth, bloom, decay. It's a reminder that change is constant and there's beauty in every stage.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So we've talked about the ecological benefits, the personal connection, but for someone who wants to create their own prairie garden, where do they even begin?
All right, so before you even start thinking about plants, you got to assess your site.
Site assessment.
Yeah, you need to know your soil type, how much sun your garden gets, and your local climate.
Okay. So you're saying do your homework before you go to the nursery?
Definitely. Once you know what you're working with, then you can start choosing plants that'll actually thrive in your space.
And we talked about native plants earlier, but I imagine narrowing down the choices can be tough.
Yeah, it can feel a bit overwhelming. But that's where those resources we mentioned come in handy. The Ladybird Johnson Wildflower Center and local nurseries. They can help you figure out what works best for your specific area.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like we don't have to do everything at once.
Nope. You can start small and build from there, Start with a few key species, get comfortable, and add more as you go. It's all about experimenting and learning. That's what makes gardening fun.
Yeah, that takes the pressure off for sure. Okay, so let's say we've picked our plants. What about the actual planting? Any special techniques?
Well, first things first. Prep work is key. You want to clear the area of any existing vegetation. So might involve removing sod tilling or even solarization.
So basically, you're creating a blank canvas for your prairie garden.
Exactly. And depending on your soil, you might need to add some compost or organic matter to help it out.
So no skimping on the groundwork?
Nope. Got to give those prairie plants a fighting chance. And then, when you actually plant, make sure to follow the spacing guidelines for each species.
Oh, I know that temptation. You want to cram in as many plants as possible.
Right. But trust me, giving them space to grow and spread is worth it in the long run.
Okay, so we've prepped planted. Now we wait.
Well, not exactly. There's still ongoing care, but it's different than with a traditional garden. It's less about controlling things and more about observing and responding.
So we're not completely off the hook. What kind of maintenance are we talking about here?
Weeding is definitely important, especially in the beginning, while those prairie plants are getting established. And those paths we talked about, they come in handy here.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking that. Not just pretty, but practical, too.
Exactly. Easy access for weeding and other tasks. And then there's pruning.
Oh, right. Do prairie gardens need a lot of pruning?
You might need to do some here and there.
Yeah.
But it's more about shaping and guiding, not like the heavy trimming you do with hedges.
So the best way to learn is to just spend time in the garden and get to know it.
You got it. The more time you spend, the more you'll understand what it needs. You'll start to notice which plants are thriving, which ones might need a little help. It's like building a relationship.
Yeah, I love that. It's a partnership.
Exactly. And as that relationship grows, you'll discover this sense of peace, wonder, connection. It goes way beyond just gardening.
It's about reconnecting with nature, right? Seeing the beauty and imperfection and finding joy in nurturing life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's amazing, right? How something like planting a garden can lead to all these incredible insights.
It really is. It reminds us that we're all part of something so much bigger.
Yeah, definitely. But as much as we've been talking about all the incredible benefits of prairie gardens, I'm also wondering about the challenges. I mean, let's be real, gardening isn't always easy, right?
You're right. There are always going to be challenges. But it's how we view them, you know?
So, instead of getting discouraged when things don't go exactly as planned, we should just accept it as part of the process.
Exactly. Think about it like this. Even in a natural prairie, there are things like drought and storms, and even wildfires.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Those are all a natural part of the cycle. And they actually often make the prairie even stronger and more diverse in the long run.
So it's like those tough times are actually good for the prairie in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how can we apply that kind of thinking to our own gardens? What are some common challenges we might face, and how can we deal with them?
Well, one thing that a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're first starting out, is weeds.
Ugh, weeds. The eternal struggle. Any tips for dealing with those pesky things?
The best thing you can do is really focus on prepping your site well in the beginning.
Okay, so like a super thorough weeding session before we even start planting.
Exactly. Get rid of as much of that existing vegetation as possible.
Ah.
And then once you have your prairie plants in, a thick layer of mulch can really help keep the weeds down.
Oh, right, mulch. Good idea.
Yeah. But you'll probably still need to do some weeding here and there. And remember those paths we talked about?
Yes.
Those make it so much easier to get around to pull those weeds.
Smart. So, weeds, check. What other challenges are there?
Pests and diseases are something to keep in mind. Now, prairie plants are generally pretty tough,
Okay, that's good.
but they're not invincible. So it's still a good idea to be on the lookout for any signs of trouble.
So, like, what should we look for? And what should we do if we see something?
Keep an eye out for things like chewed up leaves or wilting plants. If you see something suspicious, try to figure out what's going on. Is it bugs? Is it a fungus?
And how do we know?
You could do some research, maybe ask at the nursery and see what the best solution is.
Gotcha.
A lot of times, it's something simple, like adjusting your watering or fertilizing that can make a big difference.
Right, right. And are there things we can do to prevent those problems in the first place?
Oh, definitely. Choosing healthy, strong plants is key, and making sure they have enough space to breathe can help prevent fungal diseases.
So again, it's about working with nature, not trying to force things.
Yeah, exactly. And also remember that a little bit of damage is okay. In nature, things get nibbled on, and it's all part of the balance.
True, true. So it's okay if everything isn't perfectly pristine.
Yeah. It might even be a sign that your garden is attracting lots of different creatures, which is good.
That's a good point. Okay, I have another question, and I'm a little hesitant to even ask it, but
Go ahead.
okay, well, we've talked about all the good stuff, but are there any, like, downsides to prairie gardens? Any negative impacts we should know about?
That's a great question, and it's definitely important to be aware of the potential challenges. One thing is allergies.
Oh, right.
Some wildflowers and grasses can trigger allergies in people, so if that's a concern, you'd want to choose your plants carefully.
That makes sense. So again, research is key.
Definitely. And the other thing is some people just don't like the look of prairie gardens. They might think they're messy or unkempt.
Yeah, I guess it goes against that whole perfectly manicured lawn ideal.
Exactly. But the beauty of a prairie garden is that it's wild. It changes all the time, and it's about embracing those natural cycles.
It's a different way of thinking about beauty, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And, the more people create these kinds of gardens, the more it becomes normal, and hopefully those perceptions will shift.
I love that. It's like we can change what people think of as beautiful just by doing things differently. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive, and before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you said earlier that really resonated with me. The idea that even small actions can have a big impact. I mean, we don't all have tons of space for a huge prairie, but even a little patch of native plants can make a difference, right?
Oh, absolutely. Every little bit helps. Even if you just have a few pots on your balcony or a little corner in your yard, you can still provide habitat for pollinators and add some beauty to your surroundings.
It's about taking those first steps, no matter how small.
Exactly. And the best part is prairie gardens are always evolving, so you can start small and expand as you go.
I love that. So as we come to the end of our deep dive, what are some final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that creating a prairie garden is about so much more than just planting. It's about reconnecting with nature, supporting life, and finding a sense of wonder and belonging in the world around us.
It's about creating something beautiful and resilient and good for the planet.
Exactly. And it's something anyone can do, no matter where they live or how much experience they have.
So to everyone listening, I encourage you to get out there and explore the world of prairie and wildflower gardens.
Visit a nursery, talk to some experts, and let your imagination run wild.
Embrace that beautiful imperfection, celebrate the diversity of life, and create a little haven for nature right in your own backyard.
And remember, every seed you plant, every weed you pull, every butterfly you see is a step towards a more sustainable and beautiful future.
Happy gardening, everyone.